Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Today, we are going to talk about if FTP is in fact dead. We're going to go into some training mistakes that you might be making by looking at a real athlete's career, opening up the doors to see what it looks like to use TrainerRoad. We're going to get to a bunch of that stuff. It's going to be awesome. If you are watching this on YouTube, jump into the comments. And if you want us to analyze your training calendar, let us know down in the comments and share this video with other athletes. We're going to look at an athlete that claims to be, they have a tendency to overdo things. If you know somebody like that, tag them. We probably all do. Okay, first things first, let's get into just a couple bit of news items. Zwift training plans have launched. Nate,
Woohoo.
You can now train. Yeah, it's cool. You can train specifically, you can make your goal when you're building a training plan. You can make your discipline Zwift and your goal to get faster for Zwift races or climb faster up out to Zwift, which is pretty awesome. And then you can also, when you're building a training plan, you can designate a specific day. If you have a hard interval day, you can swap that over to always be a Zwift race instead. So if you always do a Zwift race on every Friday at like 10 a.m. Pacific, might be mentioning that time very specifically for a specific reason. So stay tuned there. If you always do a race around that time, maybe every Friday, instead of doing an over-under workout, whatever was scheduled, you want to do that Zwift race. You can just make it so that it's always a Zwift race. You can also do that just individually. If you have a training plan already on your calendar and you decide you want to do a Zwift race one day, you can just click that hard interval day, swap it over to a Zwift race.
And then the plan will adapt, right? So you can put that in, you'll still be able to follow a plan, and we'll look at those races and change your plan.
Absolutely. There's also another really cool feature, Nate. It doesn't have a really fancy sounding name, check volume button.
You should have had a different name for that's not the marketing name. That's don't call it that.
Yeah, exactly. But basically what you can do is while you're training throughout your training plan, TrainerRoad will increase the intensity and duration of your workouts within reason as you get stronger. So, and as you get stronger, that will happen. But sometimes maybe you just need to have more volume altogether and you need to have kind of like a reset. TrainerRoad can analyze all of your training historically and recently and suggest a recommended training volume for you. And now there's a little button whenever you go and click on your training calendar and you see your training plan. If you click on that notification, you can hit check volume and then it will run a fresh check on everything. So if you want to check that out and see if maybe you should be doing more or less volume, you can do that. It's really handy. Made a button for it to make it extra easy. So you can go check that out. And then the last bit, and this is just a quick one. If you use a Wahoo head unit with TrainerRoad, you now should go back into TrainerRoad. You'll be prompted to update your sync. You basically reauthorize with Wahoo because we have some cool new stuff with how we work with Wahoo. So now we can pull your workouts directly from Wahoo instead of having to depend on like a Strava or a Garmin or anything like that. They just pull directly over. It also makes it so that basically like your workouts are going to send over quicker and it'll just be a lot easier when you're syncing your workouts. And it also means that it'll work on the new Wahoo Element Ace. All your workouts can get sent there. So if you're a Wahoo user, check that out. And then last week, Nate, I talked a little bit about a new feature that at some point may be coming down the road. We were talking about athletes being concerned with what their workout looks like 6 months from now on a specific date and how that's really not too important because you're going to change a whole lot in between now and then. So that will constantly adjust. And as you get closer to that workout, that's when it becomes more important. And I said that we're actually looking at having a feature that would blur out what those workouts were. And some athletes responded and said, don't blur my workouts. I want to see what I have on my calendar. And I feel like I should have explained it much better.
Yeah. Can I talk about it?
Yeah, please.
I'll try my best. So here's the 2 months from now, and even the same month, but I'm using a 2-month one as an example. 2 months now, you have a Thursday on the third week. And right now we have a workout there. The likelihood that that's going to be the actual workout you're going to do, almost zero, right? FTP changes, you miss a workout, you overperform, you underperform, you change a workout. It's probably not going to be there. But the important part is that like on that Thursday, I know that I'm going to do hard start threshold intervals for 1 hour. And it's going to be about this TSS. That's the thing that we want to show. And it actually makes the calendar a lot easier to read because you're like, oh, here's what I'm going to do each day. And we have, and the thing we're building right now, it shows the images, like a generic image for what a hard start look like. You can see it's threshold hard starts. You can see that's an hour. You can change it. The estimated TSS, because they're depending on your level, it's going to be right around the same thing. And then you could actually add to your calendar too. Say, you know what? I want to delete my Tuesday VO2 max intervals and I want to do another hard start on Tuesday. And you could put that generic one down. And then on that, right before that Tuesday, we'll pick the best workout, looking at your whole career and what you're doing and your goals for that day. Respecting red light, green light, and all of that, what you've been training for. And you might see right now adaptive training, like we change one thing and it's like so many workouts change at once and it's kind of overwhelming. The idea that, you wake up and it's like, we're your coach and you're like, okay, based on what you've done, here's your workout for today. You still know it's going to be an endurance ride for an hour or sweet spot intervals for 90 minutes or something like that. But you don't know the exact name of the workout until you're going to go like the day of it. And please, if you think that's a bad idea, let us know. The other way is we give you the wrong name in the future because we're going to change it the day before anyways. So, you know what I mean? I think that's, so when people would argue, if people want to argue against this, please think of that as that it's going to most likely change. But the structure and the duration and the TSS, I think, are important. And those are things that I personally want to know. But if I'm missing something, please let me know in the forum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or on comments on this YouTube too.
Yeah. It's to recap, it'll say what zone, what workout profile. That's like the internal speak. So that might be intervals or over-unders or hard starts, like Nate said. And then you'll also see the duration and then an estimation of TSS. It actually, like Nate said, makes your calendar much easier to read. And I think athletes will really like it. I just explained it really poorly last week. So hopefully that clarifies it. And if you want that, let us know. Okay, Jared sent in a question and he did this.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
One more thing too. You would still be able to add McGregor -2 in the future if you wanted to. It's not like the only way. And you could still do specific workouts all you wanted.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. Yeah. Jared's question, you can drop your questions down in the YouTube comments down below. Go ahead and do that. Or if you're on Spotify, you can drop them there too. It says, hey coaches, not a TrainerRoad user, and I'm a relatively recently religious podcast listener. I assume you're meaning that you listen to us religiously. So that's good. Yeah. I've been noticing a recent surge of influencers downplaying FTP and even stating that if you focus on FTP, you're missing out. If I'm honest, I feel like it's just an excuse people use when their FTP isn't as high as they want, but I do feel like there is some truth behind the bruised ego. Yeah, I definitely, I can understand where he's coming from that assumption. There are multiple times when I've told myself, your FTP isn't everything after a bad test. So I know you guys focus a lot on FTP, so I'm curious on your take. Is FTP everything you should focus on, or should you forget it? Those are extremes, Nate. Everything you should focus on or forget it.
The recently religious podcast listener, I think that's the key because we've been talking about this for many years, that there is so much more than just FTP. We released our adaptive training workout levels, maybe, was it 2019?
2021?
Somewhere around there. Anyways, that's that disconnects FTP a lot from your zones and what you do. And honestly, on the internal system of ours, you're just doing wattages, okay? You're doing wattages for durations and you're able or not able to do things. And you're hitting different, zones and you're building those together for endurance, anaerobic, thresholds, stuff like that. And then we display it with a FTP and percentage of it. And that makes it a little bit more like a grounding point for people to understand, where it says, hey, I'm at 300 FTP and a level 4 threshold. I'm going to level 5 threshold. I kind of like the idea. I think this would be so shocking for people though, to really remove it and just have an absolute level system for threshold. It's 1 to 100. And this workout's a 54. And now I'm going to go to a 56. And because it's just wattages, right? You're doing 3x10 at 300 watts. You go 3x10 at 302 or 305. That's going to be harder and harder. The hard part there is we'd have to normalize the difference between 3x10 at 300 and 3x12 at 298, or 297. Is that the same level? Is that not? And we have the data to do that and we could figure that out. But we definitely can do it. It's just a math problem. That and other parts for years talking on the podcast, race strategy, how your repeatability, which is huge in races. That's we're a big fan of inside on trainer workouts where you don't stop pedaling. And when I went from cat 4 to 2 in a year doing 2-hour sweet spot workouts, 2.5-hour sweet workouts with no stopping of pedaling. You might think that's not going to help your crit riding, but it raised my FTP, but also raised my ability to like, my muscular endurance, where at the end of the ride, I had much more glycogen and I had much more pop than other people, which is a really important part. Race tactics, so important. Nutrition, like we've been talking about all this stuff for years. It'd be crazy if the podcast was just like, what's your FTP, bro? Like, this is this. Is it higher? Like, that's not what it
That's
is.
the whole premise.
Yeah, exactly. It's not what it is. It is though. That being said, for your own self, you're at 2.5 watts per kilo. You go to 3 watts per kilo, guaranteed you're faster, right? Guaranteed for the same person. Now we take 2 people at 3 watts per kilo. Who's going to win the race? I mean, there's a lot of stuff, right? What kind of race it is, the tactics, how fresh they are, what their history is, and what their weight is too, what the kind of race it is, what tires they have, right, John? Really important. Everything. That's really the thing that is everything, is your tire pressure and tires in mountain biking, and your PSI.
When I'm thinking about this, this might bring up a debate here, and I don't know how you feel, but I feel like FTP is probably the best general measurement of a cyclist's aerobic fitness. Like, you could argue maybe VO2 max is a little bit better, but when you're talking about a general thing that you can compare across the board, it's great for that. And it's really good for setting your benchmarks for training in terms of just the basics. But boy, you miss out if you're just using FTP. Like,
for sure.
A good example of this, and if there's 2 athletes and they have 200 watt FTPs, but one athlete is like me, who has a lot of anaerobic inclinations, meaning like I'm really good at the hard, repeated VO2 max style work. And let's just say that, Nate is not naturally, well, you kind of are pretty good at that stuff, but
you're punchier and I'm a roller.
I am.
Yeah.
That's right.
In our power profiling system, but it shows the difference.
You can go sign up for TrainerRoad and figure out what sort of athlete you are. When you sign up, it's cool. It analyzes your whole history, and then not only tells you what sort of cyclist you are, but it compares you against, it's got to be the biggest population of cyclists you can be compared against, like the competitive cyclists in the world. It's pretty cool. You can see how you rank for power and then also watt kg. I digress. Back to what I was talking about. Let's say you have 2 athletes. Nate and I are both 200 watts for our FTP, but I'm really good at VO2. And Nate is not good at VO2. He's really good at threshold, and that's my weakness. He and I, even though we have a 200 watt FTP, will not have the same workouts. We won't. And the reason that we won't is because we're measuring your abilities in each zone individually. So we have multiple layers of calibration in order to give you the right workout at the right time. And you need that. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with something that is subpar. So is FTP the only thing you should focus on? Absolutely not.
No way.
Should you forget it? No, I think that with TrainerRoad in the future, we might be able to forget it actually and have like a better system.
I just don't think people will like you need still, I almost kind of want to make it like secondary. So you kind of see it like things are wattage first. And then, oh, by the way, because of all of these, what is this number here that I can then use to like measure myself? But I would love just a general fitness score that takes all of these into account. But again, what you just said, one person's good at VO2 max, one person's good at sustained, 60-minute power. It's going to be a different, like, air quote fitness. And then how do you measure that? But I've thought about this so much. I think too, this has been known for so long.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I think we started building, it took us a while to really adapt to training stuff, but we really wanted to break apart from the, like 120%, VO2 max of your FTP, because just your age has a big difference. Like, there's a lot of stuff. But yeah. I think too that influencers, it's great. People want to like write articles or do things that are like sensational. FTP is dead. If you focus on FTP, it's awesome, or it's horrible. And they love to do what's called FUD in marketing: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's what you want to do to like any of the bigger players. So like us, Training Peak, Zwift, or something like that, who have market share. You want to do something that makes you think, oh, that's I have fear, uncertainty, or doubt about that. And I don't know if this influencer talking about us or anything like that. We were like the smallest one of all of those. Like you shouldn't come to us. There's much bigger players than us. But so it's not everything at all, but it's still good. I'm just agreeing with you, John.
Yeah. And, you mentioned some things also, because I feel like this is maybe tangential to this, but it also might be related because I'm not sure what they're talking about here. But the whole topic of durability.
Mhm.
Like I think last year, I think I even remember a headline maybe on Velo. It said something along the lines of like, forget FTP, durability is what you need to focus on. And the context of a lot of that discussion is they're talking to like coaches of the greatest athletes in the world, like the Tades and the Jonases, and they ask these coaches like, "Hey, how much do you focus on FTP?" And they're like, "Hardly any." Because for them, they literally have athletes that are like the pinnacle of human
You can't go
performance.
any higher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like if
you
the
can just
coach,
elongate it. You can't go any
yeah.
higher though.
So like, let's just say that you are Tade's coach and that Tade can only get like a 2 watt increase in FTP like year over year. And you say it's 90% of what I focus on. You better fire that coach.
Yeah, that'd
Like
be awful.
he should be focusing on other things. So that's why, when they say that they focus on durability, it's a bit different context. All that said, I think durability is really misunderstood, Nate. You talked about doing these 2-hour trainer rides where you're riding it like high aerobic, high percentages of your threshold for the majority of that time, but you never ease off. If you were to break down durability into what it is, contextually speaking, it's the ability to put out high amounts of power relative to your threshold toward the end of a race or under fatigue. But to build fatigue resistance and have muscular endurance, those things can happen through training in many different ways. It isn't just riding and then at the end of a long ride, you do hard efforts.
Oh no.
Instead, you build these things in a lot of different ways. And honestly, one of the greatest ways to build muscular endurance and fatigue resistance is consistent pedaling. It's not consistent hard pedaling where you have to take breaks, but it's the sort of pedaling where you don't take breaks. And that's what's so good about training indoors and totally underrated.
Mhm.
There's like, if you live in Tucson, Arizona, and your name is Keegan Swenson, then
Yeah,
yes,
lemon,
you
yeah.
can do
Yeah,
long rides where you never coast for the whole entire time.
that's insane.
The majority of people that we're talking to out here in the world don't have those circumstances and also don't have like those abilities to
Mhm.
be able to consistently hold that power the whole time. So,
You normally can't just on your
if
interval. Sorry. Like, you know what I mean?
right,
Just for an interval, much less the whole workout.
yeah. So when I know a lot of people kind of put durability at odds with FTP, but the way you raise your
Mhm.
FTP, also you should be increasing your durability as well when you do that. And here, let's like reverse this. I would be so interested to see the power files of last year at the Tour de France, for example, when it would come down to the end of the stage and Tade would be able to attack and then Jonas couldn't match him. And that was rinse and repeat throughout like the tour. I would be very shocked if just before those attacks, if Tade's IF or intensity factor was higher than Jonas's. And what I mean by that is, was their average power, had they ridden at a higher percentage of their threshold for the majority of that stage? If they had, then I guarantee you they aren't going to be able to ride as hard at the end. So like the best way, it could be argued, and this is probably going to be a bit of a, people will be upset in the comments, but I'd argue that one of the best ways, if not the best way, to raise your durability or to increase your durability is to raise your threshold. That means that to ride, let's just say they had to ride at 300 watts all day for that Tour de France stage. Well, if your threshold is 380 watts and you were riding at 300 watts all day, that's not that hard. But if your threshold is 340 watts and you rode at 300 watts, that's going to be a lot harder and you're not going to be able to attack really hard at the end. So it's, I think that whole concept is misunderstood where they place durability and FTP at odds. I think that they work together to accomplish the same thing.
I just think of it as like wattage over time. So if you're, you can do 20 minutes at 200 watts, and then later on you can do, that's your max, right? And later on you can do 300 watts at 20 minutes, to give it a big example. Your ability to do it over 2 hours is going to also go up, right?
Mhm.
And don't even think about FTP in there. You're just like, hey, that's an increase. That's great, right? That we raise the wattage at that time period. And like you said, these guys, they get to so good that they can only improve it over time and nutrition. And I think I like the word specificity more than durability,
Mhm.
because these are world tour athletes, right? That got to do this 3 weeks on, and oftentimes have little gaps between other world tour. And that is a whole incredible amount of air quotes durability. In TrainerRoad, what we do is like the specificity where in the specialty phase, right before your race, we're not working on raising your FTP. We're working on like honing your fitness where, in a criterium, you got to be really good at on-offs, right? Surging.
Mhm.
Like you got to be good on snaps and stuff like that. We got the hard starts in there. Those are things that are going to improve your fitness and overall outcome more, especially leading up to that race at the end, than doing maybe 2x20 at threshold, like a classic threshold increase. And that's why we have it in there. And that's why we don't just do, threshold VO2 max every single day. That study, I think people talked about it a lot, where they did like, they're doing like 20-minute interval, 2x20, and then they did like 5x3 or 3x5 at 120. And they did it like every day for 6 weeks, and everyone got like a huge 20% increase in FTP.
Yeah.
And nobody
Yeah.
said they would do it again. Every single person said no.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. Like, if you just want to like bang on threshold the whole time, you could do that, but it's just going to burn you out and it's going to be awful.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Structured training matters.
yeah. If anyone tries to paint us as just FTP, please send them this. We'll make a whole, send them this podcast with a timestamp at it, because FTP is definitely not everything. That being said too, if you give me 2 riders and you tell me, hey, they're accurate. This person's at 2 watts per kilo. This person's at 4 watts per kilo. Who do you think is going to win this race? I'm going to bet all my money on
4.
the 4 watt, right? Like, unless they crash or
Yeah.
it depends on what tires they use, John, actually. No, but
Yeah,
they
that's
could use
true.
the heaviest,
Key.
slowest tire still and win. But those things do tell you. You know what, too? Talk about durability. Keegan Swenson, right?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
he doesn't really focus, I don't think, on raising FTP too much. He focuses on holding sweet spot for 39 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a joke, but it's really like he
Yeah.
can hold sweet spot for such an amazing time. But he also has
Yeah.
an extremely high kg for FTP. And if he was
Yeah.
at 2 watts per kilo or 3 watts per kilo, he would not focus on just riding a percentage of that. Again, if you just take away FTP and think about wattages, just
Mhm.
this many watts. And I think, I really like to look at the weightlifting world for this, is they don't focus on a percent of their max bench press. They focus on, I'm doing this many reps for this weight, and then I'm going to like change the reps or the weight and keep going up. Right. They're
Yeah.
not like, you know what, my max is this and I got to do 70% of my max in that. Like, some people do that at the very beginning when they try to figure out what their initial one is, but you figure it out right away by just doing a set till failure.
It's
And
about
that's how,
doing more work.
exactly. Yeah. Doing more work. That's what it's about. Not specifically a certain percentage for a certain amount of time. So yeah, please, I'd love to hear about that. I just actually talked about this today in a meeting, and people would be like, they'd freak out if we just removed FTP. But I'm like, oh, it'd be so, I just like a whole fitness score from like 0 to 100 or 0 to 1,000 or something. And I was going to put like the Keegans at like
Yeah.
I was actually going to use
Yeah.
Keegan for the top one. I know there's people stronger than Keegan, but we just call them like dopers. No, just kidding.
Outliers.
Like Grand Tour, you know what I mean? Like superhuman.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and behind the
Like a
scenes,
Six
full
Sigma thing.
transparency,
Yeah.
I had no clue Nate was going to talk about this beforehand. We just talked about it right before we recorded, and Nate was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I want to talk about this." So, about this concept of maybe removing FTP.
There's no plans to do it. I've just thought about it a lot and wish that it was just all wattage based. You're just doing this, just like weight training. You're just going to do 10 reps at 100 pounds. You're going to do 10-minute intervals at 100 watts or 200 watts, And
Well, to the point of probably of some of this question here is, I do think some athletes obsess over the number itself too much, over FTP. And we see it very commonly where it distracts athletes, where they're like, I was super diligent, I followed all my workouts, and my FTP went up 1 watt, or my FTP didn't go up. And they're like, this is frustrating to me. And then if you look at their ability, they're getting PRs all over the place in terms of their ability, like outside of just what their FTP is. And if they were to go race in that moment, I guarantee you they would just love it, because they'd be so much faster than what they've been in the past. So that you can focus on it too much and you lose sight of performance. But in the end, the one thing, like going back to the aerobic fitness measurement side of things, if you're 4 watts per kilogram and you're racing against somebody that's 2 watts per kilogram, you're going to win. Like, unless something really goes wrong, you're going to win. And that is the universal nature of being able to understand a person's aerobic fitness with FTP. That is unique. Like, and our sport's so unique with it too. I was just talking to one of our employees here who has mentioned over the last 3 weeks, they have a race ride, like a drop ride, and they've blown up for the last 3 weeks in a row at the same exact NP. Like, when their NP is at this, for this sort of duration, they blow up. And they're like, I have tried different strategies. I've tried coming in with fresh mental headspace. I've tried everything. And they're like, but I can't escape what I'm capable of doing. Like, and that is the cool part of how FTP measures your abilities in a way that you can't really escape, in the sense that, yeah, you can use it to understand when Todd is going up a climb really fast. And then when I'm going up a climb really slow, I can understand
Yeah.
why, because we're at a really different level,
Um,
but it's all kind of superseded when you're talking about a training system that operates at a higher level, like TrainerRoad does. So
when too, like say you're at 1 FTP with and you're working out levels 1 and 2 for threshold or VO2, anything, say threshold through VO2 max, and then you're at a lower FTP, but working out at 8 or 9, you might be doing overall more wattage, like than the
yes.
other one, and thus you're more fit. And that's kind of gets lost in it too, is that we didn't want to it doesn't make any sense, like every workout, like change people's FTP by 1 watt or something, to get the workout just right. But changing the levels led us to step you progressively inside of workouts, either by changing the amount of intervals, the duration of them, the percentage of them, or the rest period between them. And you can step through it. And also, on some times, like in specialty, we want you to be at those higher workout levels where you're let's say you're doing a 40K TT, at those higher levels, you're really getting that sustained power for 45, 55, 40, 50, 55 minutes at the end. And we built the product so that you can end up in those at the end of your specialty phase, so that you can really hit your goals for your race there. And that's another part of the nuance in here that's huge. So it's good. It's a great question. And I guess I don't, too, the other part, it's almost like a red herring. I don't know anyone who's just man, FTP is everything. I haven't heard that from anybody recently. So I think the people doing this too, get views, and good for them. And this is good education, because I think, and when I say that, the people, I'd say from the top, the companies and stuff, I don't think anyone's just focusing just on that.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Dave, this is actually a question that on the last episode with Hannah, we covered this one, but very superficially, and we didn't go into in depth on this account. I wanted to, but Hannah and I just didn't have the time. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on this athlete's account. We're going to review it. You're going to be able to see it up on screen. And because there's a handful of things that are good learnings, but also we could probably just revisit Dave's question every week, because a lot of you are a lot like Dave. I'm also a lot like Dave. I like to do too much. So I'm going to reread Dave's question for context for people that didn't listen to last week's question or episode. If you did listen to it, you can skip ahead a few seconds, then you can listen to the rest. But Dave says, a quick bit of background. I'm relatively new to road cycling, 3 to 4 years. I'm a 46-year-old firefighter, have a VO2 of 71, lab tested.
Crazy. That's so good. That's what you are,
insane. Right? Yeah.
You're that's 72,
but I was not relatively new to road cycling 3 to 4 years. By that time I had 6 years of cycling in me, at a high level. This Dave, maybe you missed your calling, man. I'm sure you're a fantastic firefighter, and you probably could have done many things, but that's a high VO2.
Feels good to have a firefighter, that VO2. Yeah. You can carry me down stairs.
Yeah. If your name's Dave, you can carry me down the stairs. Yeah. An FTP of also 4.2 watts per kilogram, which is
4.12.
Yeah. Thank you, Nate. 4.12, at 73 kilograms. Now, this is after doing a ramp test where they were coming off of being sick. So they mentioned that their FTP, initially they had 294, and they felt that was low. We've actually looked into that. We'll get to that in just a bit. I started riding a few years ago, and untrained peaked at about 4.6 watts per kilogram at 79 kilograms, which is just wild. I typically sleep well off shift and fuel well. So this is also another crazy thing about this athlete, is shift work oftentimes holds a lot of people back. This athlete with shift work is this fast. Crazy.
You know, makes Justin Rossi. That's what this makes me think of.
My name is Justin Rossi. Yeah.
But some firefighters, fit people.
Yep. It's true. I have 2 goals: 5 watts per kilogram, and not to be a danger to anyone when I join a local cycling club in the spring for some competitive group rides, and maybe even race a little. I realize numbers don't mean everything, and I'm prepared to be schooled, but would like to be competitive. I have a
So they haven't
tendency
raced
to,
yet, right?
yes, have
They're
not
going to
raced
come
yet.
in at like 4.5 watts per kg.
You're going to be
There's a whole lot. We
hated
should
by
talk about this,
everybody in Cat
but
5.
it's gonna be a whole. Well, we could talk about that too, because that's a whole other issue of coming in so fit.
Yes. Yes. Now, Hannah and I kind of covered the basic tendencies of doing too much and that you don't want to do too much. And we're going to get into that here, but just in more context and more detail. But then we're also going to get into the context of the racing and everything else, like Nate said. Dave says, I have a tendency to do too much or I want to do more. And this brings me to my questions. Number one, I think my estimated FTP is too low, so I have many times made workouts harder. Can I replace workouts on my TrainerRoad calendar with harder ones if I feel I'm up for it? Or should I let AI do its thing regardless if I feel it's too easy?
Yeah.
We should probably address the FTP one. And do you want to look at that like first week that they started training with TrainerRoad, Nate, to kind of look at good evidence?
I kind of want to answer this question just in general. And this makes me think of like the Michael Scott thing I mentioned before, right? Where it's on The Office and they're getting like directions and it tells them to go into a river and like, I gotta go this way.
Follow
this
the
happens
machine.
on both sides where if you think it's too easy, you can one, turn up in that workout and we're going to look at that and adjust your training, or two, pick a harder workout. 100% please do that. On the opposite, if you think things are too hard and you're struggling, there's too much volume, there's so many things that could be happening, please skip it, do something easier, turn it down. There's instructional text in the workouts to be able to do that. There's some that say like, if you turn out this much, you should stop the workout. We've talked about in the podcast a lot. So it's definitely we're not just telling you what to do. It's like a conversation back and forth where you're going to give the system information, and you're going to go, but we're going to change things based on that. And also just skipping, things happen in life and you miss workouts and stuff. And then we do it. So it's all built in.
If I can add one thing to that, Nate, it's crucial to fill out your post-workout surveys. And certainly in a situation, it's always crucial, but in the situation like that, it's very crucial because that'll be sending signals to TrainerRoad that like, oh, we need to ramp this athlete up much faster than a typical athlete would of that age and that sort of thing. Or they're going to say we need to back it down and maybe make it a little bit slower.
That's like it's a 96 or 98% of them are responded to. So kudos to listeners.
Awesome. Way to go. That's great. So I want to look at this week. We're going to look at January, and this is when this athlete just started using TrainerRoad the week before. Right here, we're going to be looking at January 13th through 19th, and you can see that they signed up. They started using TrainerRoad. They came in with what they estimated was a much higher FTP. They did a ramp test under the circumstances we talked about earlier of not being in ideal form because of shift work, illness, all that stuff.
Sick, yeah.
And got a 294.
Right?
Yep.
You come in and you do test and you're sick and that it was too low.
That's right. Then if we look at the next week, we see a handful of workouts that are good examples that would show me, if I'm a coach and I'm looking at how this athlete's performing, I would say, ooh, yeah, this is definitely a situation where the FTP is probably too low for this athlete. And you can see this, like, as we can see, this athlete is riding above the power targets all the way through, especially during those rest intervals, right? So you can see that in this case, rest interval was hardly taken. In this case, the rest interval was totally skipped. And in this case, very high and then a little bit there. And then if you look at how they rated that workout, they said, and certainly in the rests in between there, they're elevated too. They rated it as moderate still. Now, if I saw somebody ride like this and they rated it like all out or very hard, I'd be like, well, they turned it up and they shouldn't have turned it up. But in this case, this signals to me that like, okay, the FTP is probably too low in this case. And you can see that all throughout here. And that's one of the main issues that we've tried to avoid. Bad tests have given athletes bad training for years, for decades. And we wanted to disintermediate that and just like cut it out. And that's why we have AI FTP detection. Now, in this case, when Dave signed up, you had to do 10 rides. For athletes that now sign up with TrainerRoad, we have a system working where you don't have to do those 10 rides and you can just use AI FTP detection from the get-go. And you can see that the same thing happens also even on like easier recovery rides here, where in this case, coming into this ride, we're only supposed to accumulate somewhere around 42 TSS. And in this case, you're accumulating 50 TSS. TSS is all calculated off of your FTP. So in this case, you're just riding at what endurance feels like most likely. And that's why you turned it up to this point. and your FTP is too low. So that all makes sense. If we kind of fast forward through things, you use AI FTP detection, happy days, you're back in a spot where it starts to be better calibrated. And we actually see that because you stop turning up the intensity all the time. And instead, you're just doing the workouts as prescribed there with the work intervals, and you're rating them how we'd expect. So I think this is a really good point. It's not always bad, right, Nate, to turn up the intensity or to do extra.
No,
And I think this is a good example of an athlete where they should be doing that. Right.
yeah. And I think too, this athlete went from what 295 to 301 to no. What's their FTP? Because they got another AFTP detection, and it was raised
that's
up
correct.
to.
They're up to 309 right now.
309. So that's like a 15 watt increase between there, and they went from what, like 4 to 4.23.
Yes,
which is awesome.
They're jumping up fast.
Yep.
So in this case, with this athlete here, I want to go ahead and take a look at some. So we've covered the fact that sometimes it is good to pick harder workouts or to raise the intensity and do that sort of thing. But then you also mention right here where we say in question number 2 from you say, a lot of the time I find the recovery wattage between hard intervals too easy. And I prefer a little more resistance. Am I ruining the workout if I do more, even if my heart rate drops quickly and I feel I'm recovering well? Let's look at an example of this one right here. I'm going to go to March 12th for this athlete, and we're going to look at a workout here. It's a sweet spot workout. So if you're listening, by the way, you should totally flip your phone sideways on Spotify, and then you can see what we're talking about. Or if you're on YouTube, you can see what we're talking about here. So this is a good example of this athlete's doing this workout in erg mode, or they're a robot. Dave might be a robot, frankly, with the numbers that he has. But and then within these rest intervals, it looks like you flip it out of erg mode. And when you flip it out of erg mode, then you can kind of ride at whatever intensity you want. And true to what you're talking about, right around 180 watts, right, is what you're at during these rest intervals in between. Now, what you're prescribed for this workout is to do them at 120. You mentioned that your heart rate drops pretty quickly. And while it does drop decently quickly there, if we look at a different workout, this threshold workout, it doesn't just drop all of a sudden to the point where it's like, oh yeah, this dude's fully recovered and he's ready to go again. You can see it creep down. Like this is when you see your heart rate kind of creep down where it's like a gradual slope until the next interval, then it goes up. That's usually a pretty good sign. You can see it drop a little lower there and drop lower here. But then later on, as you go throughout the workout, you can see that it's dropping less and less. That means you're recovering less. And my suggestion is there's no real value to raising intensity in between intervals, because your workout should actually, if that is the goal of your training, your workouts should have that built into it, right, Nate?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this athlete right here, where it can get tricky is, and you rated this one hard, as it should be, but where it can get tricky is if you do this consistently and then you do have a really hard work shift, or you have something else that's making training extra hard, or you've carried this on for a really long time, it starts to add up, and it makes it so that you're dosing yourself with extra stress that you really don't need. And the main reason you don't need it is because it's not actually going to be driving meaningful adaptations for you. Instead, it's better to focus on the work intervals, hit those, and then allow yourself to rest fully. You mentioned that, Dave, you're a person that tends to do too much. In my mind, for years, I always thought that if I make something harder, it's more productive. And that's not the case. Like, as much as I would love that to be the case, it isn't necessarily the case. Sometimes if you make something harder, it just actually makes everything a little bit less productive, or leads to the potential for that to happen. So my take on this one, Nate, I don't know about you, but I just don't see value in raising the intensity during your recovery intervals.
Dave, on those recovery intervals, they should feel like, oh, thank God, I am here. Like it should feel like a gift. And if they're not, instead of raising the recovery intervals to be higher, I would keep them, right at what the target is, and then raise the workout. So the hard parts are harder. So when you get there, you're like, oh, thank goodness. And it's more than just, depending on the workout, it's more than just your heart rate recovering. I think like after 8 minutes, I think between like VO2 max intervals, you don't get benefit, I believe. That's
you start to lose you start to get diminishing benefit from the accumulation you get at time at maximum or peak aerobic uptake. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they're going to help. And if you go from 3 minutes to 3.5 or the different wattages. We really want to make you good for those hard parts of the workout. Unless you're doing like a sustained power kind of workout, like Jonathan said. So yeah, I would keep them down and then turn up the next interval. I wouldn't do it at the very beginning. Obviously, your FTP seems pretty right now based on the workouts that we're seeing you do. But maybe you raise it a percentage, for the first intervals and see how that feels. I'm guessing too, since you're at 4.5 before, and coming back for fitness is way easier than building on top into a new underground territory. Like you're going to experience this a little bit more, where you're going to be able to turn it up as you're going through workouts.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that I want to point out with this too, with this athlete, is if we go back to this March 4th right here, this is supposed to be a recovery week. And you can see that we don't see a really neat and clean that laddering up for 3 weeks and then easing off for a week, laddering up 3 weeks and easing off. And then cumulatively, that final third loading week of these little mini cycles that you do, they get a little bit higher as you're building up in the base phase, sometimes in the build phase. In the specialty phase, you won't see them ramping up as much. But here we don't see a whole lot of that. It's not very consistent. And it would be good to see that. Now, the reasons that we see that, you can see that there's a lot of stress added on from a lot of different activities that you do. But the main reason that we aren't seeing that is sometimes you have a habit of moving skipped workouts. And I bet this is because of shift work, right? Like I could see this, Nate, but
Yeah.
skipped workouts from the week before, that's like a key workout, like a threshold workout, you move it over into a recovery week. This is a good example of this. So this workout right here, this threshold workout of Spickard plus 6, this was supposed to be done earlier in the week, back on a Saturday or Sunday, and instead there was 3.5 hours of endurance done, then 1.5 hours of endurance done. Both of those on Zwift there. So you ended up having a recovery week the next week, but you carried that over. My read is that Dave is a specimen of an athlete, and as a result, you probably have a lot of leash that like you can run a long way on that leash and get yourself into trouble before you'd ever realize it. And in this case, you probably put this threshold workout into the recovery week and you were just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm still fine. You probably didn't feel it. But if you approach things with a level of discipline early and often, and you continue that, it gives you way more headroom. Right now, what you're kind of doing is dropping the headroom by taking a recovery week and making it harder than it should be. It's just super important. If you miss a hard workout the week before, and you have a recovery week coming up, I think a good general guideline, there may be exceptions to this rule, but a good general guideline is to just let the recovery week be a recovery week still. Let the missed workout be the missed workout and just focus on the recovery week, because that's how you actually adapt and catch up to all the work you're doing, right, Nate?
Yeah. It's so hard because after the recovery week, it usually takes like a workout to get back into it. It feels like the first one, it feels a little harder. And you don't want to lose. I've been in this, like you don't want to lose any fitness because you've tried so hard. And so you want to like, you miss a workout, you want to move it around. But long term, you'll be, I think, fitter by having that separate, especially with the shift work. And we looked at the notes. I think for that hard workout, you were coming in tired too, right?
Yes.
You're like, I did a lot. I worked so much the weekend. What was it?
Yeah.
Like
Didn't
legs
complete
fatigue.
the workout.
Yeah.
Legs fatigue going into the workout. Had worked 24-hour shifts on Friday and Sunday, as well as some renos Monday. Bit off more than I could chew. And this is like a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
good. He knows afterwards.
Yep. And this is a good, this one, like you weren't able to complete it as you should have, right? Or as you would have thought you would have. But if we look back, your last threshold workout, let's see right here, threshold 4.8, you rated that as hard. You did a great job on this workout here. Look at that. Even the recovery valleys look pretty, which is fantastic. But then, you went from a relatively easy threshold workout to a beast of a threshold workout that you threw on there. Mm-hmm. That cherry picking the workouts thing too can be pretty tough, especially when the workouts are appropriately difficult. Hannah mentioned this about when we were talking about your question, Dave, but for training to be productive, it doesn't need to just completely destroy you every time. That does not directly mean it was a productive workout. Sometimes productive training will make you feel completely exhausted afterward. However, the fatigue itself is not the sign of a successful workout. And in your case, your workouts are actually looking like they're trending in the appropriately difficult space. Like you're progressing at the right rate. They aren't too easy anymore. In that case, I would stay away from trying to just challenge yourself with picking something that's going to be extra hard. And instead, I would trust the process of consistent training, because that's going to create those compounding gains. So it's a good example of that.
Can you scroll up a week too?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Dave knows what he did, right? But I'm just going to like twist the knife a little more. He did on Friday, I think he knew he was going to have a 24-hour shift. Obviously he knew. And so on Thursday, he loaded it up and he got a yellow day on Friday, which is harder to do because he has a lot of consistent training.
Yeah, it's hard for him to hit yellow days.
Yeah. And then he did some strength training, a 24-hour shift. And then on Monday, on the Saturday next day, he had a huge ride. And then on his next, that created another yellow day on his 24-hour shift. And he's like, you know what I'll do is an hour strength training and 90-minute workout too, that's actually a nice, easy workout that he did. So that's pretty good, actually. That was,
and great job, by the way, on these. Look at this. This is beautiful. This is the sort of endurance work. And
I take it back. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah. This brings up on the endurance side. Nate, we've talked about this before, and I've seen a lot of athletes just say, oh, it's just an endurance ride, so I'm just going to ride around in Zwift. You can still ride around in Zwift, but have your workout locked in, or you have your trainer locked into erg mode on your workout. And I think that that's a really good approach for a lot of athletes, because this is the sort of thing that you love to see, but you don't love to see those endurance workouts where a person actually ends up averaging somewhere around 84% of their threshold. And it's just surgy and kind of punchy all the way through. There's a bit of a misnomer too on some of those, the robo pacers that they have within Zwift, like the pace partners that they have. If it says that it's going to be at 2.5 watts per kilogram, it does not hold specifically at 2.5 watts per kilogram the whole time. Like, it surges up the hills a bit and it goes a little bit easier on the downhills, and it doesn't hold perfectly consistent. So a lot of you that may end up going to do endurance work, I think this is a really good, for an athlete that has a tendency to do too much, bravo on your discipline on a workout like this, to just say, no, I'm going to do the endurance workout and I'm just going to stick to that rather than doing too much. Because I bet with your mentality, this might have felt boring, but I think it was the right thing to do. Sometimes good training does feel boring, and it's all creating space so that you can actually dose yourself with the stress that makes a difference.
And that's good discipline too, because a 90-minute ride for 50 TSS, and while you're working a 24-hour shift, watch some TV, that's nice. So Dave, I'm sorry, you did a great job there. And then you knew that you did a little too much. I think you're probably going to adjust after that. You bit off more than you can chew. So great on saying that rather than, questioning your whole training system. That was, you know what I mean? Because some people do that. You miss one workout and you're like, I think I'm going to switch to CrossFit. Like, that's the way to you know what I mean? Where there's probably other situations that have happened, other things, or one bad race. You know what I mean? Have you ever done that? I've never done
that. At Dave's in a firefighter environment, probably has a lot of strength training equipment available to them. A lot of them have gyms, insane VO2 max around the sort of weight. Dave, you're probably a beast of a CrossFit athlete too, or you could be. So
yeah, right. Yeah.
Don't get any tendencies. Stick with cycling.
Yeah. Can't wait, Dave. You're going to get 5 watts per kilo. For sure.
100%.
100%.
You're going to see a big jump up here, especially now as you're just entering the build phase. It's going to rip you right up. It's going to be awesome. So Dave, keep us posted. If you want your training calendar analyzed like Dave, if you don't use TrainerRoad, sign up for TrainerRoad, and then we can analyze your training calendar, and we'll do that here on the podcast. You can just drop your comment down below into the YouTube comments. Or if you do use TrainerRoad and you want us to check it out, of course, just let us know. We'll do the same thing. It's a lot of fun for us to be able to look at this and see how athletes are approaching training, and hopefully it's educational for all of you. If you have not signed up for TrainerRoad yet, you should. It makes you faster. It's making cyclists faster all around the world. Don't let them get faster than you. You can join the Zwift Club. That's where we have a bunch of stuff going on. We're going to have some races coming up soon. Stay tuned for races. I'm just going to come out and say it because I'll go and schedule it. We're going to do a race, and that's going to be Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific. That's going to be 5 p.m. UTC, I believe, for all the folks that are over in Europe. We're going to be doing one on loop to loop. That's going to be the route. It's going to be a fun race. Come join. You can find all those details in the TrainerRoad Zwift Club. We'll link to that down below and talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.